At this very moment, someone less capable than you is succeeding. What's their secret? They project unwavering certainty. Their words flow without doubt. They carry themselves as though everything belongs to them, and society accepts this. While you, on the other hand, pause. You analyze endlessly. You search for the perfect timing, the ideal phrasing, the correct emotion. During your waiting, another person claims what should have been yours. Confidence transcends being merely a characteristic. It functions as armament. Without wielding it, others will turn it against you. This truth was understood by Machiavelli centuries past. The audacious advance despite lacking ability. The uncertain remain stagnant regardless of their brilliance. Power doesn't gravitate toward excellence. It flows to those most resolute. This presentation marks a pivotal moment, not for inspiration, not for reassurance, but for dominion. You'll discover how to eliminate doubt, communicate like a sovereign, and carry yourself like someone who anticipates obedience. Pay attention carefully. Moving forward, your frailty will find no sanctuary. It shall be transformed. Weakness wasn't your birthright. It was instilled within you, through repetition, through conditioning, through systems, shaped for compliance, molded to pursue validation, programmed to question, may I? What currently resides within you isn't a leader, it's a subordinate, designed for pleasing others, engineered for surrender, a faithful hound that cowers from criticism and seeks permission, that internal voice, the hesitant one, the overthinker, the one apologizing before utterance. That isn't your true self. That represents the inner subordinate. Unless you eliminate him, freedom will remain elusive. Machiavelli never spoke softly. He issued commands. He refused to wait for comprehension. He executed plans and allowed others to follow. He never requested authority. He claimed it, understanding that those who ask prove unworthiness. Your metamorphosis begins through reversal. When impulse says shrink, instead expand. When tempted to justify, instead pause. When inclined to apologize, instead maintain eye contact. True confidence doesn't emerge from feeling prepared. It springs from actions the inner subordinate would never attempt. You increase your pace. You claim territory. You cease nodding. You abandon softening your delivery. You communicate as though your statements are verdicts, not proposals. Confidence transcends mental state. It becomes essence. That essence forms through rebellion, not against society, against the part of you still seeking to serve. Therefore, here's your primary principle. Whatever diminishes you, eliminate it. A notion, a pattern, an individual, destroy it. If it breeds hesitation, face it directly. If it weakens you, refuse it. If it seeks acceptance, mock it. Society will advocate for kindness, courtesy, and pleasantness, but here lies Machiavellian reality. Pleasant men become instruments. They face exploitation, abandonment, replacement. Influential men aren't pleasant. They're exact, deliberate, disciplined, strategic. This begins by destroying that small voice within you that still pleads for acceptance. Permission isn't required. Validation isn't necessary. Only one thing matters: the readiness to inspire fear, not in others, but in your previous identity. Once you destroy the subordinate, the sovereign emerges. Influential men don't announce their arrival. They arrive with authority, not through vocal expression, through their quiet strength, their composure, their gaze. Recognition isn't needed. Affection isn't required. You need only the atmosphere to transform upon your entrance. That's movement from someone who commands the space, not because he's been informed of this, but because his behavior assumes it always was. Machiavelli grasped this within royal circles. Those who governed weren't necessarily the monarchs. Sometimes it was the figure in the shadows who rarely spoke, but during his rare words, every courtier listened intently. Silence equals dominance. You believe talking establishes superiority. It doesn't. It creates predictability. The silent individual poses the threat because his thoughts remain unknown. Upon entering any space, you don't seek approval. You don't scan for validation. You observe. You process. You allow others to scramble, proving themselves while you strategize. Your bearing communicates before speech begins. You move deliberately, not from uncertainty, but because urgency isn't necessary. Hunters don't rush unless striking time arrives. Until that moment, they remain patient, composed, prepared. Most people remain unaware of their rapid movement, their hurried speech, their frequent interruptions. This stems from their desire to impress, because they remain under someone else's evaluation. But when you enter commanding the space, your words aren't meant to impress. You speak to determine. Every phrase carries finality. Each word resonates like a conclusion. People begin listening differently. They don't question you. They adjust themselves to you. When others speak, you remain patient. You allow them priority. You let them expose their desperation, their insecurity, their vulnerability, because the first speaker typically reveals their fears. Once you understand that, you can influence them completely. You don't pursue energy, you generate attraction. Because confidence at this magnitude isn't about popularity, it's about making others question their standing simply through proximity to you. Therefore, you conduct yourself like victory is already yours, not with arrogance, but like someone who doesn't compete because he's already selected himself. If they show respect, excellent. If they don't, even better, because indifference toward approval represents power's ultimate expression. If the room wasn't yours upon entry, by departure, they'll remember it as though it belonged to you, not because you demanded ownership, but because no demand was necessary. Language isn't merely sound. Words are instruments of war. Most men speak as though requesting permission to exist. You identify them immediately. The upward inflection concluding every statement, the anxious chuckling, the constant, I believe, perhaps, I'm uncertain, however. They communicate as though apologizing for occupying space. That isn't communication. That constitutes self-destruction. Machiavelli understood the reality. Authority isn't always in your message, but your delivery method. When you speak with undeniable certainty, people don't scrutinize your content. They surrender to your conviction's force. Because here's the dynamic. People aren't rational. They're driven by emotion. They don't follow facts. They follow confidence, sound certain, and they assume correctness. Hesitate, and they assume you're worthless. So how does a Machiavellian voice sound? It's deliberate, composed, decisive. You communicate as though your words aren't debatable, as though each statement represents a declaration. You speak like someone already expecting compliance. It's irrelevant if you're surrounded by specialists. If you sound like a resolution, they'll yield. That's the fundamental rule. Sound like the conclusion, not the opening. And here's what most will never reveal. You needn't speak frequently to command respect. Actually, the more you say, the more opportunities you provide others to decode you, challenge you, or worse, stop fearing you. Speak sparingly. Convey more. When you do communicate, remove gentleness. No padding, no justifications, no regrets. Never say, I'm merely stating. I might be mistaken. I'm unsure if this is coherent, but those are exits for the weak. Eliminate them. Express your meaning and conclude there. Allow others to handle the following silence, because silence after powerful statements carries force. It challenges people to contest you. Most won't. Why? Because they fear what else you might express. Now comprehend this. Your vocal tone conveys your true message. Words remain surface level, but your tone, your composed, grounded, intentional tone, tells people precisely where you stand hierarchically. Want to rise? Deepen your pitch, reduce your speed, eliminate nervous energy. Sound like someone with nothing to prove and everything controlled. Sound like a man who's decided and expects the world to follow. You don't win discussions through volume. You win them by speaking so people feel your words aren't suggestions, they're realities. This is how leaders communicate, how commanders communicate, how exiled kings speak before reclaiming their thrones. If someone challenges you, never defend, redirect. Don't debate, don't justify, don't rationalize. Simply state, I disagree, or preferably, that's wrong. Then continue forward, because refusing to debate signals something frightening, that your reality isn't negotiable. That's how you control environments without volume increase, because confidence isn't loudness, it's gravitational pull. It's the invisible force behind your words, the assumption that when you speak, others should attend. When you communicate, the room should sense it, not through noise, not through arrogance, but through unshakable certainty. You're not attempting correctness, you're speaking like someone incapable of error. You're not seeking audience, you're speaking like someone indifferent to agreement, because eventually you will agree. That's authority. Moving forward, that's your communication method, or you remain silent. Confidence lacking control becomes ornamentation. You can maintain posture, communicate effectively, move with command, but if someone can still provoke you with words, you aren't powerful. You're vulnerable. This is where most men falter. They master presence, they master speech, but their emotions still belong to others. A hint of disrespect, and they respond. A compliment, and they soften. Silence, and they unravel. You aren't liberated until you master the invisible battle, the one within your mind. This begins by restructuring your identity. Machiavelli understood this in power's corridors. He didn't fear opponents, he feared dependency, emotional or otherwise. He didn't trust affection, he trusted control. Because once people know your triggers, they know your pressure points. Once they know your pressure points, you're no longer dangerous. You're controllable. Controllable men face disposal the moment they lose utility. So here's the transformation. You stop being the reactive man. You become the calculating man. Someone insults you. You don't justify. You observe. You gather information. What are they seeking from you? What are they concealing behind the insult? Someone praises you. You don't soften. You analyze. Why are they complimenting you now? What do they want? Someone ignores you. You don't panic. You become colder still. Silence becomes your tool, not your injury. This is what becoming psychologically unreachable means. Not emotionless, but immovable. You feel everything, but you act on nothing unless it serves your purpose. When someone tests you, you don't strike out. You show no visible discomfort. Why? Because your mind isn't public territory. It's a stronghold, and you control access. That's how you end manipulation. Most men are so easily controlled, it's ridiculous. Tell them they're inadequate. They'll over-justify. Tell them they're incredible. They'll pursue you. Withdraw emotionally from them, and they'll plead to reconnect. This isn't power. This is conditioning. Until you break the pattern, you'll always be someone else's instrument. So how do you rewire? You eliminate the need for understanding. That's the core infection. The desire to justify yourself, to be seen, to be validated. It's what makes you controllable. Destroy it. You don't exist for understanding. You exist to influence the world around you. Strategically, precisely, quietly, you eliminate the fear of rejection. Because the Machiavellian mind doesn't pursue acceptance, it controls availability. You don't want invitations. You want people wondering what happens when they lose access to you. You eliminate the habit of emotional reactions. Emotions are genuine but irrelevant unless weaponized. You're angry? Channel it as energy. You're insulted? Convert it to advantage. You're doubted? Transform it to silence, and let outcomes speak later. This is how influential men are forged. They don't become mechanical, they become undeniable, because once no one can affect you emotionally, they can only observe you move with precision and fear your next action. Let others pursue peace and understanding. You pursue clarity and control, because the world ignores your feelings. It only responds to your projection, certainty, direction, gravity. When your identity becomes immovable, you become dangerous, not through violence, not through volume, but through inaccessibility. The people around you will attempt. They'll test you. They'll ignore you. They'll tempt you. But nothing succeeds. You remain consistent, cold, composed, calculated. Eventually, they stop trying to manipulate you because they realize something terrifying. You are the one person they cannot affect. This is the final transformation. Not posture, not speech, not appearance, but identity. You are no longer shaped by others. You shape the environment. You shape the parameters. You shape the result. You don't need understanding. You don't need acceptance. You need nothing from anyone, because now you belong to no one, and that makes you untouchable. Rejection feels like injury to the weak. To the powerful, it's information, a present, a message from the world saying, you were too accessible, too transparent, too eager. Good. Now you understand what requires elimination. Understand this. Rejection isn't personal, it's positional. People reject what they believe they can manage without. So if they refused you, it means they believe they lost nothing. That's not an offense, that's intelligence. Now you know their position, and yours, which means you can now position yourself to return later, when they're vulnerable, and you're unreachable. Step 1. Never show impact. The moment you display pain, they win. It's not even about them, it's about your reputation. A Machiavellian mind doesn't panic when doors close. It makes the room frigid. You weren't rejected. They were disqualified from reaching you. Rejection only exists when you acknowledge it, so you don't respond. You develop. Step 2. Remove your presence like a weapon. What happens when something you assumed permanent disappears? You start feeling its significance, its worth. That's precisely what you do when rejected. Disappear. No justifications, no emotional goodbyes, just strategic withdrawal. While they feel the emptiness, you construct. Machiavelli said, men should be either treated well or destroyed because they seek revenge for minor injuries, but not for severe ones. So don't wound them, make them irrelevant. Make your silence stronger than your voice. Make them wonder about your location, how far you've progressed, and if they ever truly had access to you. Step 3. Redefine the story. Rejection only holds power if it appears you were pursuing something. So rewrite the narrative, not for them, but for yourself. You weren't rejected. You removed yourself from a game beneath you. You permitted their refusal because you were studying their conduct. You gave them one chance to demonstrate they possessed the wisdom to recognize power. They failed. In that failure, they revealed everything you needed to know. Now you disappear and improve. Step 4. Transform rejection into control. Here's where you triumph. Rejection provides clarity. Most people exist in confusion, not knowing who respects them, who uses them, who fears them. But rejection cuts through that confusion like steel. Now you know who's blind. Quietly, you eliminate the fear of rejection. because the Machiavellian mind doesn't pursue acceptance. Now you know where your power currently lacks impact. Yet, so what's your action? You refine your advantage. You enhance your image. You amplify your worth so powerfully that the people who once ignored you now must justify themselves when they mention your name. When they return next time, they will. You don't even need to reject them. You've already evolved beyond their grasp. That's control. Silent, permanent, elegant. Step 5. Weaponize your return. The goal is never revenge. Revenge is emotional. Machiavellian power is always calculated, so you don't try to retaliate against anyone. You let time handle that for you. You reappear only when your presence creates discomfort, when your success is so evident they can't avoid it, when the person who rejected you is now observing you dominate the very arena they thought you didn't belong in. You say nothing. You offer no malice, no irony, no pride. You offer a simple look, or better, no acknowledgement at all. Because now you're not seeking acceptance, you're establishing the benchmark. Final word. Rejection is not defeat, it's the examination, the filter, the fire that reveals what needs to be cold, what needs to be severed, and who needs to be abandoned. So remember this, you weren't rejected, you were redirected toward a version of yourself that doesn't ask repeatedly, doesn't flinch, and doesn't wait to be selected. Now go construct in silence, and return as a force they can't reject, even if they desire to. You've been reconstructed, not inspired, not motivated, rebuilt from the core outward. You destroyed self-doubt, not with affirmations, but with action. You didn't wait to feel prepared. You moved, you acted, and you discovered that power doesn't belong to the flawless. It belongs to the brave. You took rejection and converted it to energy. No more pursuing approval. Now you let people feel the price of losing you. You became rare, strategic, silent, and they noticed. You stopped entering rooms seeking acceptance. Now you command them through presence, posture, and precision. You no longer speak to be heard. You speak as if no one can afford to disagree. And above all, you reconstructed your identity. You're no longer predictable. You're no longer easily influenced. You've become unreachable, emotionally untouchable. They can't provoke you. They can't entice you. They can't disturb you, because you belong to no one now. And that makes you unforgettable. That's what creates a legend. Not noise, not fame. Powerful silence, cold clarity, ruthless consistency. You don't need to announce your transformation. They'll sense it in your stride, in your tone, in your absence. You've become the man people observe quietly, the one who used to pursue, now being pursued, the one who used to ask, now deciding, the one who no longer needs approval because he became the standard. So no, this wasn't about confidence. This was about dominance, mental, emotional, psychological. You are not here to belong. You are here to move the elements, to influence the room, to haunt their memory, even in silence, because legends don't plead, they don't explain, they exist, and the world reshapes around them. Final command. Like this video if you're finished chasing. Subscribe if you're ready to become the kind of man they can't control, can't predict, and can never forget. Because this isn't self-help, this is warfare, and you just became a weapon. Quietly, you eliminate the fear of rejection. Because the Machiavellian mind doesn't pursue acceptance,